The bass was pounding so loud that the champagne glasses on the marble countertop were vibrating. $100 bills floated through the air of the penthouse like confetti, and Marcus Hayes stood in the center of it all, a bottle of Dom Perignon in each hand, laughing like a man who had just escaped prison. The crowd of people surrounding him, most of whom he'd met less than a week ago, cheered and grabbed at the money as it fell. A young woman with platinum blonde hair and a dress that probably cost more than most people's rent clung to his arm. Her surgically enhanced lips curved into a smile that was equal parts adoration and calculation. To new beginnings, Marcus shouted over the music, spraying champagne across the crowd like a Formula One driver who'd just won a championship. To finally living the life I deserve. The party was everything you'd expect from a man who had just won $47 million in the state lottery. Expensive alcohol, expensive people, and an expensive view of the city skyline from the floor-to-ceiling windows of a penthouse that cost $30,000 a month to rent. Everyone at that party thought they were witnessing a lottery winner's dream come true, the ultimate rags-to-riches story of a construction worker who had finally caught his lucky break. They had no idea they were watching a woman's worst nightmare begin, and they definitely had no idea they were watching the birth of that woman's greatest triumph. Because 30 miles away from that celebration, in a tiny one-bedroom apartment that smelled like burnt coffee and desperation, Sarah Hayes sat on a second-hand couch she'd bought from a thrift store, staring at her phone screen with tears streaming down her face. The Instagram post showed her husband, the man she'd been married to for 3 years, the man whose debts she'd worked herself into the ground to pay, throwing money in the air while a model draped herself over him like a human accessory. The caption read, "Living my best life with my real soulmate. Sometimes you have to let go of dead weight to fly. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag lottery winner, hashtag blessed life." Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped her phone. She'd just finished her shift at the convenience store, her second job of the day. She still had to go to her third job in an hour, cleaning office buildings downtown. And after that, if she could stay awake, she'd do her fourth job, delivering food orders until 3 in the morning. She'd been working 4 jobs for the past 18 months, surviving on 90 minutes of sleep per night, destroying her health and her sanity, all to pay off the $180,000 in debt that her husband had accumulated through his gambling addiction. And now Marcus had won the lottery, $47 million. With a ticket that Sarah had purchased with her own money, the last $20 she had left after paying bills, money she'd planned to use to buy groceries for the week. She'd bought that ticket at the gas station on her way home from the hospital, where she'd just been discharged after collapsing from exhaustion at her teaching job. She'd handed the ticket to Marcus as a desperate, hopeless gesture. A woman so broken that she was literally gambling her grocery money on the impossible dream that something, anything, might save them. And it had. The ticket had won. $47 million. Enough to pay off every debt. Enough to let Sarah quit 3 of her 4 jobs. Enough to finally breathe after 18 months of drowning. Except Marcus hadn't invited her to the celebration. Marcus had taken the ticket, claimed the money, moved into a penthouse, and announced to the world that he was starting fresh without the dead weight that had been holding him back. The dead weight being Sarah, the woman who had sacrificed everything to save him. Sarah scrolled through the comments on Marcus's post, each one like a knife to her chest. "Dude, where's your wife?" someone had asked. Marcus's reply, "She's yesterday's news, bro. I'm focused on tomorrow." Another comment, "Didn't she work like a million jobs to help you?" Marcus's reply, "She was always bringing me down with her negativity. Real winners surround themselves with winners. That's why I've got destiny now." He tagged the blonde model, whose profile described her as an entrepreneur and lifestyle influencer, which Sarah's exhausted brain translated as professional gold digger. Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She didn't recognize the number, but she answered anyway, hoping irrationally that it might be Marcus calling to tell her this was all a misunderstanding, that he was coming home, that they would face their new fortune together like the partners they were supposed to be. "Is this Sarah Hayes?" a male voice asked, cold and professional. "Yes, this is Sarah. This is Bradley Morrison from Morrison & Associates. We represent your husband, Marcus Hayes." in the matter of your marriage dissolution. We're calling to inform you that divorce papers will be served to you within 48 hours. Mr. Hayes is offering you a settlement of $50,000 in exchange for your signature on the papers and your agreement not to contest the divorce or make any claims on his recent lottery winnings. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. $50,000. Out of $47 million. Less than 0.1% of the winnings from a ticket she had purchased with her own money while Marcus sat at home unemployed, playing video games and gambling online with credit cards in her name. The ticket, Sarah heard herself say, her voice barely above a whisper. I bought that ticket. With my money. According to our client, the ticket was purchased with household funds, and as Mr. Hayes was the one who verified the numbers and claimed the prize, the winnings are solely his property. The $50,000 offer is extremely generous considering you have no legal claim to the money. I'd advise you to take it, Mrs. Hayes. Litigation would be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately unsuccessful. The lawyer hung up before Sarah could respond. She sat there on her thrift store couch, in her tiny apartment that she could barely afford even working 4 jobs, staring at her phone screen, and something inside her that had been bent for 18 months finally snapped. Not broke, snapped, like a blade that had been pressed and pressed until it transformed from something that could bend into something that could cut. Sarah pulled up her contacts and scrolled to a name she hadn't called in months. Denise Callahan. They'd gone to community college together, back when Sarah still had dreams of becoming a high school English teacher before Marcus's debts had forced her to drop out. Denise had gone on to law school, graduated at the top of her class, and was now a family law attorney with a reputation for taking on difficult cases and winning them. The phone rang 3 times before Denise answered. Sarah? Oh my God. Sarah. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I saw the news about Marcus winning the lottery. Please tell me you're calling because you need a lawyer and not because you're calling to tell me you're okay with what he's doing. I need a lawyer, Sarah said, and her voice was steady now, cold and clear. Marcus's attorney just called me, offered me $50,000 out of $47 million. I bought that ticket, Denise, with my money, while I was working 4 jobs to pay his gambling debts. And he's trying to take it all and leave me with nothing. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Denise spoke again, her voice had changed from friendly to professional, with an edge of barely contained rage. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. Do not even talk to his lawyers again without me present. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? I have work tomorrow morning. For jobs. Remember? Not anymore, you don't. As of right now, your only job is building the case that's going to destroy Marcus Hayes. I'll see you at 9 a.m. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Not because she had to wake up in a few hours for her 4 a.m. food delivery shift. That had been her reality for 18 months and her body had learned to function on almost no rest. She couldn't sleep because for the first time since she'd married Marcus, she felt something other than exhaustion and despair. She felt rage. Pure, focused, crystalline rage. And underneath the rage was something even more powerful. Determination. Marcus thought he could discard her like trash. He thought that because he'd always been able to manipulate her, to make her feel guilty for not being supportive enough, to convince her that his problems were really her responsibility to solve, he could do it one more time. He thought she was too weak, too broken, too beaten down to fight back. He was about to learn that he'd been wrong about everything. To understand how Sarah Hayes ended up working 4 jobs to support a gambling addict who would eventually abandon her, you have to go back 3 years, to a neighborhood barbecue on a sunny Saturday afternoon in late June. Sarah was 27 years old, teaching English at the local community college, living in a small but comfortable apartment, and genuinely happy with her simple, stable life. She had friends, hobbies, dreams of eventually getting her master's degree and maybe writing a novel. She wasn't looking for romance, wasn't desperate for a relationship. She was complete on her own. That's when she met Marcus Hayes at her neighbor's backyard cookout. He was 29, a construction foreman with calloused hands and an easy smile, and when he talked about his dreams of starting his own construction company, there was a light in his eyes that made Sarah believe he was someone who made things happen. He wasn't flashy or overly charming. He seemed genuine, hardworking, down to earth. He asked Sarah about her teaching job with real interest, listening to her talk about her students and her love of literature like it actually mattered to him. "I never liked school much," Marcus admitted as they sat on lawn chairs watching the sun go down. "But I always respected teachers. Takes a special kind of person to care about other people's kids like they're your own." They talked for hours that night, long after the other guests had left. Marcus told her about growing up with a single mother who'd worked 2 jobs to keep him fed and clothed, about how he'd learned construction because it was honest work that paid decent money, about how he wanted to build something that would make his mother proud. Sarah told him about her own dreams, about the novel she was trying to write, about how she wanted to make a difference in students' lives the way her own favorite teacher had made a difference in hers. When Marcus asked for her number at the end of the night, Sarah gave it to him without hesitation. And when he called her the next day to ask her to dinner, she said yes without any of the usual doubts or second-guessing. The first year of their relationship was everything Sarah had ever wanted in a partnership. Marcus was attentive without being clingy, supportive without being patronizing, affectionate without being overwhelming. He showed up to her poetry reading at the college even though he admitted he didn't understand half the poems. He fixed her car when it broke down and refused to let her pay him. He brought her favorite Thai food to her apartment when she was grading papers late into the night, just because he knew she'd forget to eat. "You're too good to me," Sarah told him one evening as they sat on her couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "You deserve someone who's good to you," Marcus replied, kissing the top of her head. "I'm just trying to be the man you deserve." They got married 8 months after that barbecue, a small ceremony at the courthouse with just a few friends as witnesses. Marcus said he didn't want to wait, that when you know you've found the right person, there's no point in delaying. Sarah's friends had gentle concerns about the speed of it all, but Sarah brushed them off. She was in love. Marcus was perfect. They were going to build a beautiful life together. The first crack in the perfect facade appeared about 6 months into their marriage. Sarah came home from work to find Marcus sitting at their kitchen table, his head in his hands, surrounded by credit card statements. When he looked up at her, his eyes were red like he'd been crying. "Baby, I need to tell you something. I messed up. I messed up really bad." He explained that he'd been playing poker with some guys from his construction crew. Just for fun at first, small stakes, nothing serious. But then he'd started winning, and winning felt so good after years of barely scraping by, and he'd started betting bigger amounts. And then his luck had turned, and he'd kept betting, convinced that he was due for a win, that his luck would come back around. Before he knew it, he was $15,000 in debt on credit cards Sarah didn't even know he had. "I'm so sorry," Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. "I know I should have told you sooner. I just kept thinking I could fix it myself, that I could win it back and you'd never have to know. I'm so ashamed. If you want to leave me, I'd understand." Sarah should have left. Looking back years later, she would recognize that moment as the turning point, the moment when she should have walked away and saved herself from everything that was coming. But she was young and in love, and Marcus seemed so genuinely remorseful, and marriage was supposed to be for better or worse, wasn't it? "We'll figure it out," Sarah heard herself say. "Together. That's what marriage is. We'll pay it off together." Marcus hugged her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I don't deserve you. I swear to God, Sarah. I'll never let you down like this again. I'm done gambling. Completely done. I'll get a second job if I have to. We'll pay this off and put it behind us." But Marcus didn't get a second job. Instead, he started working fewer hours at his construction job, claiming that the company was cutting back shifts because of the economy. Sarah picked up extra tutoring sessions in the evenings to help pay down the debt faster. She didn't mind, she told herself. This was temporary. They'd get through it together, and their marriage would be stronger for having overcome this challenge. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus hadn't stopped gambling. He'd just gotten better at hiding it. The $15,000 in debt became $25,000, then $40,000, then $60,000. He opened new credit cards in Sarah's name, using her information because his own credit was destroyed. He told her the statements coming in the mail were old debts he was paying off, bills from before they got married. And Sarah, exhausted from working extra hours and wanting desperately to believe her husband accepted his explanations without digging deeper. The truth came out on a Tuesday night 14 months into their marriage. Sarah was making dinner when someone knocked on their apartment door. She opened it to find two large men in leather jackets, the kind of men whose presence immediately made you understand that whatever they wanted, you should give it to them. "Marcus Hayes live here?" one of them asked, though his tone made it clear he already knew the answer. "He's not home right now. Can I help you with something?" "Yeah, you can help us. Your husband owes our boss $120,000. He's got until Friday to come up with at least 50 grand or we start taking payments in other ways. You understand what I'm saying?" Sarah's blood went cold. 120,000? That's not possible. There must be some mistake. The man pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. Marcus, sitting at a poker table, surrounded by chips and cards and other men. The timestamp on the photo was from 2 nights ago, when Marcus had told Sarah he was working a late shift at a construction site. "No mistake, lady. Your husband's got a serious problem. And now you've got a serious problem. Make sure he gets the message." After they left, Sarah sat down at her laptop and did what she should have done months ago. She pulled her credit report. What she found made her physically sick. Credit cards she'd never opened. Loans she'd never applied for. All in her name. All maxed out. Her credit score, which had been excellent before she married Marcus, was now in the low 400s. She was financially destroyed, and she hadn't even known it was happening. When Marcus came home that night, actually coming from a casino rather than from work, Sarah was waiting for him with printouts of all the credit reports spread across their kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. $120,000, Marcus. You've destroyed my credit. You've put us in debt to loan sharks. And you lied to me. You looked me in the eye every single day and lied. Marcus crumbled immediately. He fell to his knees, literally begging, tears and snot running down his face in a display of desperation that would have been pathetic if it wasn't so calculated. "They're going to kill me, Sarah. These aren't regular loan sharks. These are serious people. If I don't pay them, they'll hurt me. They'll kill me. You're the only person who can save me. Please. I know I don't deserve it, but please." Sarah should have walked away. She should have called the police, filed for divorce, and let Marcus face the consequences of his own actions. But the men who had come to her door had been terrifying, and despite everything Marcus had done, she didn't want to see him hurt. And underneath all her anger was a voice that had been carefully planted by Marcus over the past year. A voice that whispered that maybe this was somehow her fault, that if she'd been more supportive, more understanding, more attentive, maybe Marcus wouldn't have felt the need to escape into gambling. "How do we pay them?" Sarah heard herself ask, and with those words, she sealed her fate for the next 18 months of hell. The plan, if it could be called a plan, was simple in the way that drowning is simple. Sarah would work more hours, take on additional jobs, and funnel every possible dollar toward paying off Marcus's debts. Marcus would get help for his gambling addiction and look for better-paying work. They would sacrifice together, partners facing a challenge. That's not what happened. What happened was that Sarah took on a second job working retail on weekends. Then a third job cleaning office buildings at night. Then a fourth job doing early morning food deliveries. Meanwhile, Marcus's construction hours mysteriously kept dwindling until he was barely working at all. He was looking for better opportunities, he said. He was networking and building connections. He was attending support groups for his gambling addiction. All lies. Marcus was spending his days sleeping, playing video games, and yes, still gambling, though now he was more careful about hiding it. He'd learned that if he only gambled smaller amounts and spread it across multiple platforms, Sarah wouldn't notice the drain on their accounts. He'd learned exactly how much he could steal from the woman working 4 jobs to save him without triggering her suspicion. Sarah's life became a blur of work, sleep deprivation, and desperation. Her schedule was inhuman. 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. delivering food orders, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. teaching at the community college, 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. working retail, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. cleaning office buildings. That left her with maybe 90 minutes of sleep if she was lucky, usually less. She ate one meal a day, whatever she could grab between jobs. She stopped seeing friends because she didn't have time. She stopped writing because she didn't have energy. She stopped being Sarah Hayes, English teacher with dreams and hobbies and a personality, and became nothing more than a machine for earning money to feed Marcus's addiction. Her body began to break down. She lost 25 pounds she couldn't afford to lose. Her hair started falling out. She developed a chronic cough that never went away. Dark circles under her eyes became permanent fixtures. Her hands shook constantly from exhaustion and stress. Friends who saw her were shocked by her appearance, asking if she was sick, if she needed help. Sarah always smiled and said she was fine, just busy, just working hard to pay off some debt. She was too ashamed to admit the truth, that her husband had destroyed her financially and was sitting at home letting her work herself to death to fix his mistakes. The breaking point came on a Wednesday morning 15 months into this nightmare. Sarah was teaching her 9 a.m. American literature class, discussing The Great Gatsby, with students who were barely paying attention, when the words on the board started to blur. She tried to blink the blurriness away, but it only got worse. The classroom started spinning. She heard one of her students call her name, concerned, and then everything went black. She woke up in a hospital bed with an 4 in her arm and a doctor standing over her with an expression that was equal parts concern and frustration. "Mrs. Hayes, when's the last time you had a full night's sleep?" Sarah tried to think. "I don't know. A few days ago? Try a few months ago, according to your blood work and your physical symptoms. Your body is shutting down from exhaustion. You're severely malnourished. Your cortisol levels are through the roof. Quite frankly, I'm surprised you didn't have a heart attack. You're 30 years old and your body is functioning like someone in their 60s. The doctor pulled up a chair next to her bed. "I'm going to be blunt with you because I think you need to hear this. If you continue living the way you've been living, you're going to die. Not eventually. Soon. Your body cannot sustain this level of stress and deprivation. Whatever is causing you to work yourself to death, it's not worth your life." Sarah started crying, and once she started, she couldn't stop. She cried for the marriage she'd thought she had. She cried for the dreams she'd abandoned. She cried for the version of herself who used to be happy and hopeful and whole. She cried because she was so tired, so unbearably tired, and she didn't know how to stop being tired because stopping meant letting Marcus face the consequences of his actions, and she'd been conditioned to believe that his consequences would somehow be her fault. The hospital kept her overnight for observation. Marcus didn't visit. He called once, sounding annoyed that she'd made a scene at work and that the hospital bills were going to set back their debt repayment. Sarah hung up on him mid-sentence, and for the first time in 15 months, she felt a flicker of something other than exhaustion. She felt anger. When she was discharged the next afternoon, Sarah stopped at a gas station to get something to eat. As she was paying for a sandwich and coffee, she saw the lottery ticket display. The jackpot was $47 million. On impulse, more out of nihilistic desperation than actual hope, Sarah pulled out her last $20 bill, money she'd been planning to use for groceries, and bought a ticket. She didn't check the numbers. She didn't carefully select them or have any system. She just took the quick pick ticket, folded it into her pocket, and drove home to the apartment where Marcus was, predictably, playing video games on the couch. "Here," Sarah said, pulling the ticket out of her pocket and tossing it onto the coffee table. "Maybe this will finally be your lucky break." Marcus barely glanced at it. "Thanks, babe. Did you get groceries?" "No. I spent the grocery money on the lottery ticket. I figured we're already screwed. Might as well go all in on a miracle." Marcus frowned, finally looking up from his game. "That was stupid, Sarah. We need food. Then get a job and buy some," Sarah said, and she walked to their bedroom and closed the door before Marcus could see that she was crying again. That lottery ticket sat on their coffee table for 3 days. Sarah looked at it every time she walked past. A little rectangle of paper that represented her last $20 and her complete loss of hope. She didn't even check the numbers when they were drawn on Friday night. She was too exhausted to care. Marcus checked them. Marcus, who hadn't contributed $1 to their household in months, who had spent the week gambling away money they didn't have on his phone while Sarah worked 4 jobs, picked up that ticket on Saturday morning and checked the numbers. Sarah was asleep, grabbing a precious 2-hour rest period between her night cleaning job and her morning delivery job, when she heard Marcus scream. She jerked awake, heart pounding, convinced something terrible had happened. She ran to the living room to find Marcus standing in the middle of the room, holding the lottery ticket, staring at it like it was a holy relic. "We won," he whispered. "Sarah, we won. All the numbers. We won $47 million. For a moment, Sarah couldn't process what he was saying. It was too impossible, too much like a dream. Then the reality hit her and she started screaming too, jumping up and down, hugging Marcus, both of them crying and laughing and unable to believe that their nightmare was finally over. "We're saved," Sarah kept saying. "We can pay off the debts. I can quit 3 of my jobs. We're saved." Marcus held her tight, and for the first time in months, Sarah felt the way she used to feel around him. Safe, protected, like partners facing the world together. "I need to go verify this," Marcus said, pulling back. "I'll go to the lottery office right now and make sure it's real." "I'll come with you," Sarah said, but Marcus shook his head. "You should rest, babe. You've been working so hard. Let me handle this. I'll go claim the ticket, set everything up, and when I get back, we'll celebrate properly. Together. I promise." Sarah was too exhausted and too happy to argue. She watched Marcus leave with her ticket, the one she'd bought with her last $20, and she went back to bed thinking that finally, after 18 months of hell, their luck had changed. She didn't hear from Marcus for 3 days. His phone went straight to voicemail. He didn't come home. Sarah went from happy to confused to worried to terrified, convinced that something had happened to him, that the loan sharks had found him, that he'd been in an accident. She was about to file a missing person report when she got a text message from a number she didn't recognize. It was a link to an Instagram post. Sarah clicked it with shaking hands, and what she saw destroyed her more completely than 18 months of working 4 jobs ever had. It was Marcus, in a penthouse apartment, surrounded by people she didn't recognize, throwing money in the air while a blonde woman in a tight red dress kissed his cheek. The caption read, "Living my best life with my real soulmate. Sometimes you have to let go of dead weight to fly." Sarah tried to call Marcus. His number was disconnected. She tried to go to the penthouse, but the doorman wouldn't let her up. She tried to contact the lottery office, but they told her the prize had been claimed by Marcus Hayes and they couldn't give her any information. She went back to their apartment to find that Marcus had come while she was out. He'd taken his clothes, his computer, even the wedding photos. The only thing he'd left was a note on the kitchen counter. "Sarah, this is my chance to start over. You were always holding me back with your negativity and your need to control everything. I'm done living in the shadow of your disapproval. Don't try to contact me. I've already filed for divorce. My lawyer will be in touch. Goodbye." Sarah read that note 10 times, each reading making her feel more disconnected from reality. She'd worked 4 jobs for 18 months, destroyed her health, sacrificed everything, all to save Marcus from the consequences of his gambling addiction. And he thought she was holding him back with her negativity. He thought she was controlling him. He thought she was the problem. Sarah's phone rang. A lawyer representing Marcus, offering her $50,000 out of $47 million if she signed divorce papers immediately and made no claim to the lottery winnings. That's when Sarah stopped being the exhausted, manipulated woman who had spent 18 months enabling her husband's addiction. That's when she became someone else entirely. Someone harder. Someone angrier. Someone who was done being a victim. She called Denise Callahan, her old friend from community college who was now a lawyer. And she said 5 words that would change everything. "I need your help. Now." The morning after that devastating phone call from Marcus's lawyer, Sarah sat in Denise Callahan's law office, a modest but professional space in a renovated building downtown. Denise was 31, with dark curly hair pulled back in a neat bun and the sharp, focused eyes of someone who'd fought hard for everything she had. She'd grown up in the same working-class neighborhood as Sarah, put herself through law school on scholarships and student loans, and built a reputation as a family law attorney who specialized in cases where women were getting screwed over by wealthy or manipulative spouses. "Tell me everything," Denise said, sliding a legal pad across her desk. "And I mean everything. Don't leave anything out because you think it's not important or because it makes you look bad. I need the whole truth." For the next 2 hours, Sarah laid out the entire nightmare. Meeting Marcus at the barbecue. The first revelation about his gambling debts. The escalating lies. The loan sharks. Her decision to work 4 jobs. The collapse at school. The hospital stay. Buying the lottery ticket with her last $20. Marcus checking the numbers, claiming he needed to verify the win, and then disappearing for 3 days before announcing on social media that he was starting a new life without his deadweight wife. Denise took notes the entire time, her expression getting darker with each new detail. When Sarah finished, Denise put down her pen and looked at her friend with a mixture of sympathy and barely controlled rage. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. What Marcus did isn't just morally reprehensible. It's legally actionable. That lottery ticket was purchased with marital funds during your marriage. In this state, that makes it marital property, which means you're entitled to half. The fact that he's trying to claim sole ownership and offering you essentially nothing is fraud. But he's the one who checked the numbers. He's the one who went to the lottery office and claimed the prize. Doesn't matter. You bought the ticket with your money while you were married. The law is very clear about this. But here's where it gets complicated." Denise leaned forward, her expression serious. "Marcus now has $47 million, which means he can afford the most expensive lawyers in the state. They're going to fight this hard. They're going to try to paint you as a gold digger, as someone who's only interested in money. They're going to dig into your life looking for anything they can use against you. This is going to be ugly, expensive, and exhausting. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah thought about the past 18 months. Working 4 jobs, 90 minutes of sleep per night, collapsing from exhaustion, watching her body break down while Marcus sat at home gambling away her earnings, being abandoned the second their luck changed. And she thought about that Instagram post, about Destiny in her tight red dress, about Marcus throwing money in the air, while the woman who'd saved him wasn't even invited to the celebration. "I'm prepared," Sarah said, and her voice was steel. "I didn't survive the last 18 months just to let Marcus steal from me one more time." Denise smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who'd just taken on a case she was going to enjoy winning. "Good, because we're not just going to fight this. We're going to destroy him. Now let's talk about evidence." Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah and Denise built their case with the precision of prosecutors preparing for a murder trial. They gathered bank statements showing that Sarah's income from her 4 jobs had been the only money coming into their household for the past 18 months. They collected credit card statements showing Marcus's continued gambling even while Sarah worked herself to death. They obtained hospital records from Sarah's collapse, including the doctor's notes about her severe exhaustion and malnutrition. They got sworn statements from Sarah's employers at all 4 jobs, confirming the hours she'd worked and the toll it had taken on her. But the most damaging evidence was the simplest. The receipt from the gas station where Sarah had purchased the lottery ticket. It showed the date, the time, the debit card number, and the amount. Sarah's debit card, Sarah's money, and security footage from the gas station showed Sarah making the purchase alone. Marcus wasn't even there. "This is gold," Denise said, reviewing the footage. "He can't claim he bought the ticket or that you bought it together. You bought it alone with your money while he was at home. This proves it's marital property purchased by you." They also investigated Destiny, the blonde woman who'd been draped over Marcus at his celebration party. What they found was illuminating. Destiny Torres was 23 years old with a history of dating wealthy men, collecting expensive gifts, and moving on to the next target when the money dried up. Her social media was full of designer handbags, luxury vacations, and inspirational quotes about attracting abundance and manifesting wealth. She described herself as an entrepreneur, but Denise's investigator couldn't find any actual business. "She's a professional gold digger," Denise explained, "and I guarantee she's pushing Marcus to keep you out of the money. The more he gives you, the less there is for her to spend." But as strong as their evidence was, Marcus had something they couldn't match. Money. Lots of it. He'd hired Bradford Morrison, one of the most expensive divorce attorneys in the state, known for protecting wealthy men's assets in messy divorces. Morrison's strategy became clear quickly. They filed a motion claiming that Sarah had been financially irresponsible during the marriage, that she'd forced Marcus into gambling as a form of escape from her controlling behavior, and that the lottery ticket, while technically purchased during the marriage, should be considered separate property because Marcus was the one who'd verified the numbers and claimed the prize. It was absurd, but it was also exactly the kind of argument that sometimes worked when one side had unlimited money for legal fees and the other side was a woman who'd just worked 4 jobs for 18 months. "They're going to try to bury us in paperwork," Denise warned. "Every motion they file costs us time and money to respond to. It's a war of attrition. They want to drain your resources until you give up and take whatever settlement they're offering." "I don't have resources to drain," Sarah said. "I barely have enough money to buy groceries." "Then we need to get creative." Denise's first move was to go public. She contacted local news stations with Sarah's story, presenting it not as a divorce case but as a human interest story. Woman works 4 jobs to pay husband's debts. He wins lottery and abandons her. The story went viral within hours. Local news became regional news, became national news. Sarah's face was everywhere. The exhausted woman who'd sacrificed everything for a man who'd thrown her away the second he got what he wanted. The public response was overwhelming. #JusticeForSarah started trending on Twitter. Women shared their own stories of financial abuse and abandonment. Marcus's Instagram was flooded with comments calling him every name imaginable. Death threats started coming in. His publicist, because he'd hired a publicist, released a statement claiming the situation was more complicated than it appears, and that both parties share responsibility for the breakdown of the marriage. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict, and Marcus Hayes had been found guilty. But public opinion doesn't determine legal outcomes. For that, they needed to win in actual court. Marcus's legal team counterattacked by trying to paint Sarah as a manipulator who was using media sympathy to pressure Marcus into an unfair settlement. They filed motions requesting gag orders to stop Sarah from speaking to the press. They demanded psychological evaluations to determine if Sarah was mentally stable. They even hired a PR firm to plant stories suggesting that Sarah had been abusive during the marriage, that she'd driven Marcus to gambling through her controlling behavior, that she was now trying to steal money she didn't deserve. It was a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm and intimidate. And it was working. Sarah's legal bills were mounting. Denise was working at a reduced rate because they were friends, but even reduced rates added up when you were fighting a man with $47 million. Sarah had to quit 3 of her 4 jobs just to have time to work on the case, which meant she had even less money coming in. She was being evicted from her apartment because she couldn't afford rent. Her car was repossessed because she couldn't make payments. She was living on a friend's couch and working food delivery just to afford basic necessities. One night, sitting in her car between delivery orders, Sarah broke down completely. She was exhausted, hungry, and starting to think that maybe she should just take Marcus's settlement offer and walk away. $50,000 wouldn't change her life, but it was better than nothing. Maybe the lawyer was right when he said litigation would be expensive and ultimately unsuccessful. Maybe she should just accept that Marcus had won and move on with whatever scraps she could salvage. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Check your mailbox. A friend." Sarah frowned. She didn't have a mailbox anymore. She'd been evicted. But her old landlord had been sympathetic to her situation and had agreed to hold any mail for her. Sarah drove to her old apartment building, and the landlord handed her a small envelope that had arrived that day. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000. No name, no explanation, just a note written in elegant handwriting. "For legal fees. Some of us believe in justice. Don't give up now." Sarah stared at that check, her hands shaking. $50,000. Exactly the amount Marcus had offered her to go away. But this money came with no strings, no requirements that she sign away her rights. This money came from someone who believed she deserved justice. "Who sent this?" Sarah asked her landlord, but he just shrugged. No idea. Courier dropped it off this morning. Wouldn't give a name. Sarah took that check to Denise's office the next morning. I don't know who sent this, but I'm using it to keep fighting. Denise examined the check carefully. This is legitimate. Drawn on a private bank, the kind that handles accounts for very wealthy people. Someone with serious money is helping you. The question is who and why. Over the next few weeks, more envelopes arrived. Never at the same place twice. One came to Denise's office. One was delivered to Sarah's friend's house where she was staying. One was handed to her by a stranger on the street who said he'd been paid to deliver it. Each envelope contained money, sometimes 10,000, sometimes 20,000. Each came with a similar note. For rent. For food. For the fight. Don't stop now. Someone was bankrolling her war against Marcus. And that someone clearly had resources that matched or exceeded Marcus's lottery winnings. Denise hired an investigator to try to trace the money, but whoever was sending it had covered their tracks expertly. All the investigator could determine was that the funds were coming from a private wealth management firm that handled accounts for people with net worths in the billions. You have a guardian angel, Denise told Sarah. And whoever they are, they're making sure you have the resources to fight Marcus on equal footing. With her mysterious benefactor's support, Sarah could focus entirely on the case. They hired their own financial experts to analyze Marcus's spending since winning the lottery. What they found was damning. In just 3 months, Marcus had blown through over $2 million. Penthouse rent, designer clothes, expensive cars, jewelry for destiny, and most tellingly, gambling. Lots of gambling. Despite having $47 million, Marcus couldn't stop himself from gambling. He'd already lost hundreds of thousands at high-stakes poker games and online betting. He's going to blow through the entire fortune, Denise said, reviewing the financial records. At the rate he's spending, he'll be broke again in a few years, which means we need to move fast before there's nothing left to fight for. They filed for an expedited trial, arguing that Marcus was actively wasting marital assets. The judge, perhaps swayed by the media coverage or perhaps just recognizing the validity of their argument, agreed. The trial was set for 3 months away. Those 3 months were a blur of preparation. Depositions, document review, witness preparation. Sarah had to relive every painful moment of her marriage, explaining in excruciating detail how Marcus had manipulated her, lied to her, and ultimately abandoned her. Marcus's lawyers tried to break her during depositions, asking invasive questions about her sex life, her mental health, her relationship with her parents. Anything they could use to paint her as unstable or vindictive. Sarah held firm. Every question they asked, she answered calmly and honestly. Yes, she'd worked 4 jobs. Yes, she'd collapsed from exhaustion. Yes, she'd bought the lottery ticket with her last $20. Yes, Marcus had abandoned her 3 days after winning without even telling her where he was going. The facts were on her side. All she had to do was tell the truth. The day before the trial, Sarah received one final envelope. Inside was a check for $100,000 and a note that was longer than the previous ones. Tomorrow you fight for justice. Win or lose, you've already proven you're stronger than the man who tried to break you. But I believe you're going to win. Because truth has a way of winning in the end, especially when it has the resources to fight properly. Good luck. You deserve everything you're fighting for. You always have. Sarah read that note over and over, trying to understand who would care this much about her case. Who would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars supporting a woman they'd apparently never met. Who had the resources and the motivation to bankroll her fight against Marcus. She fell asleep that night not knowing the answer. But tomorrow in court she would find out. Because tomorrow everything would change. The courtroom was packed. News cameras lined the hallway outside, reporters jockeying for position. The case of Hayes versus Hayes had captured national attention. The lottery winner who abandoned his wife had become a symbol of everything wrong with instant wealth and selfish men. And Sarah, the woman who'd worked 4 jobs and been discarded, had become a symbol of resilience and the fight for justice. Marcus arrived in a custom 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Sarah had earned in the entire 18 months she'd worked 4 jobs. Destiny was with him, wearing a designer dress and enough jewelry to fund a small car. They looked like celebrities arriving at a premiere, not people arriving at a courthouse to determine the fate of a broken marriage. Sarah arrived in a simple navy dress she'd bought at a thrift store. She looked tired because she was tired, but she also looked determined. She'd come too far to back down now. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to Marcus's lawyer Bradford Morrison, entered the courtroom, and the proceedings began. Marcus's lawyers went first, painting a picture of a marriage destroyed by Sarah's controlling behavior and financial irresponsibility. They claimed that Marcus had been the victim, trapped in a relationship with a woman who manipulated him and drove him to gambling as an escape. They argued that the lottery ticket, while technically purchased during the marriage, should be considered Marcus's separate property because he was the one who'd had the foresight and initiative to check the numbers and claim the prize. It was a masterful performance of fiction presented as fact. If Sarah hadn't lived through the real story, she might have almost believed it. Then it was Denise's turn. She stood up, walked to the center of the courtroom, and began to methodically destroy every lie Marcus's lawyers had told. Your Honor, the defense has presented an interesting story. A story about a controlling wife and a victimized husband. But stories are just that, stories. Let's talk about facts. Denise presented the bank statements showing Sarah's 4 incomes and 0 income from Marcus. She presented the hospital records showing Sarah's collapse from exhaustion. She presented the credit card statements showing Marcus's continued gambling. She presented the gas station receipt and security footage showing Sarah purchasing the lottery ticket alone with her own money. The defense wants you to believe that Mr. Hayes is a victim. Let's examine that claim. Is he a victim of his own gambling addiction that put his family $180,000 in debt? Is he a victim of his choice to remain unemployed for 18 months while his wife destroyed her health working 4 jobs? Is he a victim of his decision to abandon his wife 3 days after winning a lottery prize that she purchased, moving into a penthouse with his girlfriend, while offering his wife 0.1% of the winnings? Denise's voice rose with controlled passion. No, Your Honor. Marcus Hayes is not a victim. He's a man who manipulated and exploited his wife, who took her labor and her sacrifice and her love, and who discarded her the moment he no longer needed her. And now he wants this court to reward him for that behavior by letting him keep money that legally belongs to both of them. The next 2 days of trial were a systematic dismantling of Marcus's defense. Sarah took the stand and told her story, showing the judge bank statements, work schedules, medical records. Every piece of evidence supported her testimony. Marcus's lawyers tried to trip her up, asking why she'd stayed if things were so bad, why she'd enabled his gambling, why she hadn't left sooner. Because I loved him, Sarah said simply, and because I believed that marriage meant you didn't give up when things got hard. I was wrong. I should have left the first time he lied to me about gambling. But I didn't because I thought I could save him. I thought if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, loved him enough, he would become the man I married. I was wrong about that too. Then Marcus took the stand, and Denise destroyed him. Every question revealed another lie, another manipulation, another way he'd exploited Sarah's love and trust. When Denise played a recording obtained from security footage of Marcus and Destiny at a restaurant, laughing about how stupid Sarah had been to work so hard while Marcus figured out how to get rid of her, even the judge looked disgusted. The final blow came when Denise presented evidence of Marcus's spending since winning the lottery. $2 million in 3 months. $600,000 on gambling alone. He'd bought Destiny a car. He'd purchased a vacation home. He'd spent $15,000 on a single bottle of champagne. Your Honor, Denise said, Mr. Hayes isn't just trying to steal from his wife. He's actively wasting marital assets. At his current rate of spending, the $47 million will be gone in less than 5 years. My client is asking this court to protect her legal rights before there's nothing left to protect. After 2 days of testimony, Judge Morrison called for closing arguments. Marcus's lawyer stood up and delivered a passionate defense of his client, arguing that the lottery win was Marcus's fresh start and that Sarah should be grateful for the $50,000 offer. Denise stood up for her closing, and her voice was quiet but powerful. Your Honor, this case is about more than money. It's about whether we live in a society where a person can work themselves to death for someone they love, sacrifice everything to save that person from their own mistakes, and then be cast aside the moment their usefulness ends. It's about whether marriage means anything, or whether it's just a convenience that men like Marcus Hayes can discard when they no longer need their wives' labor. She paused, looking directly at Marcus. Sarah Hayes bought a lottery ticket with the last $20 she had after 18 months of working 4 jobs to pay her husband's gambling debts. She gave that ticket to him not because she thought it would win, but because she'd given him everything else and didn't know what else to give. That ticket won $47 million. And 3 days later, Marcus Hayes abandoned her without a word, without a thank you, without even the basic human decency of telling her to her face that he was leaving. Denise turned back to the judge. This is marital property. The law is clear. Sarah Hayes is entitled to half. Not as a gift, not as charity, as her legal right. And we're asking this court to enforce that right before Marcus Hayes gambles away every dollar that his wife's sacrifice helped him win. Judge Morrison took a 1-hour recess to consider her verdict. Sarah sat in the courtroom, Denise beside her, watching Marcus and Destiny whisper frantically to their lawyers. An hour felt like a year. Sarah's entire future hung in the balance. Either she would get the justice she'd fought for, or Marcus would walk away with everything, proving that manipulation and betrayal paid better than sacrifice and love. When Judge Morrison returned, her expression was unreadable. I've reviewed all the evidence presented in this case, and I'm prepared to render my decision. Sarah held her breath. The lottery ticket in question was purchased by Sarah Hayes with funds from her personal bank account during the course of her marriage to Marcus Hayes. Under state law, this makes the lottery winnings community property, regardless of which spouse physically claimed the prize. Therefore, Sarah Hayes is entitled to 50% of the after-tax winnings. Sarah felt Denise grab her hand and squeeze. They'd won. They'd actually won. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, I'm awarding Sarah Hayes full payment of the marital debts, totaling $180,000, to be paid solely by Marcus Hayes, as these debts were incurred by him through his gambling addiction. I'm also awarding Sarah Hayes her full legal fees, which total approximately $300,000. And finally, I'm awarding Sarah Hayes $2 million in emotional damages for the demonstrable harm caused by Marcus Hayes' exploitation and abandonment. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Marcus looked like he'd been punched in the face. Destiny looked furious, probably calculating how much her sugar daddy had just lost. When the chaos died down, Judge Morrison spoke again, and her voice was cold. Mr. Hayes, I've been a judge for 17 years, and I've seen a lot of ugly divorces. But I have rarely seen a case where one spouse so thoroughly and deliberately exploited the other. You took advantage of your wife's love, her work ethic, and her commitment to your marriage. You allowed her to work herself into the hospital while you sat at home gambling. And when fortune finally smiled on your family, you abandoned her without a second thought. The fact that you expected this court to reward that behavior is frankly astonishing. She banged her gavel. Case closed. Sarah walked out of that courtroom $25.5 million richer. But more than that, she walked out vindicated, proven right, justified in her fight. The woman who'd been called a gold digger and a manipulator had been declared by a court of law to be a victim of exploitation who deserved justice. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded her, shouting questions. Sarah had prepared a statement with Denise's help. For 18 months, I worked 4 jobs to pay my husband's gambling debts. I sacrificed my health, my career, and my happiness because I believed in my marriage vows. When I bought that lottery ticket with my last $20, I wasn't thinking about winning. I was thinking about how I was going to survive one more day. That ticket won, and my husband abandoned me without a word. But today, justice won. Today, a court recognized that marriage means partnership, that sacrifice deserves recognition, and that people who exploit the ones who love them should face consequences. I hope my case helps other people in similar situations understand that they don't have to accept abuse, financial or otherwise. You can fight back, and sometimes you can win. That night, Sarah received a phone call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, exhausted from the trial and the media circus. But something made her pick up. "Ms. Hayes? My name is Julian Blackwood. I wonder if you might have time to meet with me tomorrow. I have something I'd like to discuss with you." Julian Blackwood. Sarah knew that name. Everyone knew that name. He was a tech billionaire, one of the richest men in the world, worth an estimated $8 billion. He'd founded a software company in his 20s and sold it for a fortune, then spent the next decade investing in startups and building his wealth to almost unfathomable levels. "Why would Julian Blackwood want to meet with me?" Sarah asked, confused. "Because I've been following your case very closely. I'm the one who's been sending you the money." Sarah's heart stopped. "You're my anonymous benefactor?" "Yes, and I'd like to explain why, if you'll give me the chance." "Are you available tomorrow?" "I'll send a car." The next morning, Sarah found herself in the back of a town car, being driven to an office building in the financial district. She was ushered into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And there, sitting at the head of a long table, was Julian Blackwood. He was 43, with gray threading through his dark hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He stood when Sarah entered, offering his hand. "Ms. Hayes, thank you for coming. Please, sit down." "Mr. Blackwood, I don't understand. Why did you help me? You don't even know me." Julian sat down across from her, and his expression was complicated, a mixture of sadness and determination. "My mother died 10 years ago. She was 62 years old, and she died in poverty, working 2 jobs just to afford rent on a studio apartment. This was despite the fact that my father was a wealthy man who'd left her when I was 8 years old for a younger woman. He had the resources to support her, but he chose not to. He fought her in court, hired expensive lawyers, and managed to walk away from their marriage paying minimal alimony and child support. My mother spent the rest of her life struggling while he lived in luxury." Julian's voice was steady, but Sarah could hear the pain underneath. "I was too young to help her. By the time I'd made my own fortune, she was gone. I've spent the last decade wondering if there was something I could have done, some way I could have fought for her the way she'd fought for me. And then I saw your story on the news. A woman working 4 jobs to support a gambling addict husband. A woman who collapsed from exhaustion. A woman who was abandoned the moment her usefulness ended. And I saw my mother." He looked directly at Sarah. "I couldn't save my mother, but I could help you. I could make sure that one woman, at least, had the resources to fight back against a man who thought his money made him untouchable. So I funded your legal battle. All of it. The $300,000 in legal fees, the money for rent and food, everything. Consider it paid in full. You don't owe me anything." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. You don't need to thank me. You did the hard part. You stood up and fought when it would have been easier to give up. You won your case because you were in the right and you refused to back down. I just made sure you had the resources to see it through." Julian paused. "But I didn't ask you here just to reveal myself. I have a proposition for you." He slid a folder across the table. "I run a foundation dedicated to helping people escape financial abuse. We provide legal support, temporary housing, job training, financial education, everything needed to help people rebuild their lives. I'd like to hire you to run our survivor advocacy program. You'd work directly with people who are in situations similar to what you experienced, helping them understand their rights and options. The salary is $200,000 a year, full benefits, and the chance to use your experience to help thousands of people." Sarah opened the folder, barely able to process what she was seeing. A job offer, a real career, not just a collection of survival jobs. The chance to turn her nightmare into something that could help other people. "Why me?" she asked. "I'm not a lawyer or a counselor. I'm just someone who survived." "Exactly," Julian said. "Our clients don't need another lawyer or therapist telling them what they should do. They need someone who's been where they are. Someone who understands what it feels like to be trapped, to be exploited, to be told you're worthless by the person who's supposed to love you. They need someone who can look them in the eye and say, 'I know how hard this is, and I know you can survive it because I did.' That's something no degree can teach. Sarah looked at the offer letter, at the salary that was more than she'd made in the past 3 years combined, at the job description that would let her help other people escape the hell she'd lived through. And she thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, happy and hopeful, believing in love and marriage and partnership. And she thought about the woman she'd become, scarred but stronger, broken but healing, no longer naive but also no longer afraid. "I accept," she said. 3 months later, Sarah sat in her new office at the Blackwood Foundation, reviewing the case file of a woman who'd come to them for help. She was 35, working 3 jobs to support her unemployed boyfriend's drug habit, convinced that if she just loved him enough, he'd get clean. Sarah saw herself in every word of that file, and she knew exactly how to help, not because she'd studied it in a textbook, but because she'd lived it. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Marcus Hayes declares bankruptcy following divorce settlement and continued gambling losses. Sarah read the article. Marcus had gone through his remaining $20 million in less than a year. Destiny had left him the moment the money was gone. He was now living with his mother, working construction again, and facing lawsuits from various creditors. Sarah felt nothing looking at that article. Not satisfaction, not pity, not anger. Marcus was no longer her problem. He was just a man who'd made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences. She hoped he'd eventually get help for his addiction, not for her sake, but for his own. But that was his journey, not hers. Her journey was here, in this office, helping a woman named Jennifer understand that working 3 jobs for an addict boyfriend wasn't love. It was exploitation. That she deserved better. That there were resources available to help her escape. That survival was possible and so was rebuilding. In her first year at the foundation, Sarah helped 47 women escape financially abusive situations. She spoke at conferences about recognizing financial manipulation. She worked with legislators to strengthen laws protecting vulnerable spouses in divorce proceedings. She published a book called Breaking Free, Escaping Financial Abuse, that became required reading in social work programs. And she did it all with the quiet support of Julian Blackwood, who never asked for recognition or credit, who simply wanted to make sure that other people got the help his mother never had. 5 years after that courtroom victory, Sarah stood on a stage at a national conference on domestic violence, looking out at an audience of advocates, survivors, and policymakers. She'd been asked to give the keynote speech about her experience and the work she'd done since. 5 years ago, Sarah began, I was a woman who'd worked 4 jobs to pay my husband's gambling debts. I destroyed my health, sacrificed my dreams, and nearly lost my life trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. And when fortune finally smiled on us, when the lottery ticket I bought with my last $20 won $47 million, my husband abandoned me without a word. He thought that money was his escape from me. What he didn't understand was that it became my escape from him. She paused, looking at the faces in the crowd, seeing recognition in many of them. I fought back. With the help of an incredible lawyer and a guardian angel I didn't even know I had. I fought for what was legally mine and I won. But the real victory wasn't the money. The real victory was learning that I was worth fighting for. That I didn't have to accept exploitation just because it came wrapped in the language of love. That I had the strength to survive and the power to rebuild. Sarah smiled, thinking about the hundreds of women she'd helped over the past 5 years. Women who'd come to her broken and left stronger. Women who'd learned the same lesson she had. That survival was only the beginning. Today, I run a program that helps people escape financial abuse. I work with survivors who are where I was 5 years ago, scared and exhausted and convinced they have no options. And I get to tell them the truth: you have options. You have rights. You have the strength to fight back, even when you think you have nothing left. And you don't have to do it alone. She held up a card, the same card she'd designed for the foundation, the one they gave to every person who walked through their doors. If you're in a situation where someone is exploiting you financially, where you're working yourself to death to support someone else's addiction or irresponsibility, where you feel trapped and hopeless, please know, you're not alone. There are resources. There are people who will help you fight. And there is life after escape. I'm living proof. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. After her speech, dozens of people approached Sarah, some to share their own stories, some to ask for help, some simply to say thank you for speaking a truth they'd needed to hear. As Sarah drove home that night, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain of those 18 months working 4 jobs. The betrayal of Marcus's abandonment. The long fight for justice. The unexpected guardian angel who'd given her the resources to fight. The career she'd built from the ashes of her broken marriage. She thought about the woman she'd been. The one who'd believed that love and sacrifice would be enough to save a man who didn't want to be saved. And she thought about the woman she'd become. Someone who knew that the only person she needed to save was herself. Marcus had thought that lottery ticket was his escape to a better life. Instead, it had become Sarah's transformation into someone stronger, wiser, and more purposeful than she'd ever imagined she could be. He'd tried to break her. Instead, he'd forged her into something unbreakable. And as Sarah pulled into the driveway of the small house she'd bought with her settlement money, as she walked inside and saw the comfortable life she'd built for herself, she realized something important. She'd won, not just in court but in life. She'd survived, rebuilt, and transformed her pain into purpose. Marcus was broke and alone, having gambled away his fortune and destroyed every relationship he'd ever had. Sarah was financially secure, professionally fulfilled, and surrounded by people whose lives she'd helped change. That lottery ticket had been the best and worst thing that ever happened to their marriage. For Marcus, it had revealed who he truly was. A selfish man who'd exploited his wife's love until he no longer needed it. For Sarah, it had revealed who she could become. A woman strong enough to fight for herself and compassionate enough to help others do the same. The story that had started with betrayal and abandonment had ended with justice and purpose. And Sarah Hayes, the woman who'd once worked 4 jobs to save a man who wasn't worth saving, had finally learned the most important lesson of all. The only person who could save her was herself, and she had, spectacularly.